almost to the point of getting my stamp to say, just don't listen to these guys. They're too biased. Hi, this is Dr. Eric Westman with another Dr. Westman Reacts. Is it okay to eat eggs every day? From Mastering Diabetes. I'm pleased to announce the 7-day keto challenge coming up May 9 through 15. More about that at the end of the video. So of course, when you want to learn from an internet influencer, you want to know what their pedigree is or their background, where they got training. Mastering Diabetes is a site, and this video comes from there, with Dr. PhD Cyrus Kambata and Robbie Barbaro, MD or PhD. So non-MDs, which you're going to see is pretty important, at least in my opinion. And they have a book called Mastering Diabetes. And so Dr. Kambata is a PhD, apparently has a degree in mechanical engineering from Stanford. Well, I a graduate undergrad major from Stanford, 1982, and then went to medical school at the University of Wisconsin, residency University of Kentucky, and I've been at Duke University for 30 years. So I wonder where Dr. Kambata got his medical, no medical education. Well, so he spent time at Stanford in engineering and then nutritional biochemistry from UC Berkeley, and then has type 1 diabetes. So this is the information I got from the book that they have, and then his co-author has a degree in public health and spent 6 years helping build the Forks Over Knives empire, and has been living with type 1 diabetes. If you haven't heard of the Forks Over Knives, and to have it said as Forks Over Knives empire, to me is even worse. It's like, the empire and the Empire Strikes Back. But no, I think there are a lot of healthful ways to eat. But what you're going to see, and maybe I should have a stamp on the video that it says plant-based bias, because you're going to see people who have figured out for them, and they think for everyone, that the certain way to eat is the best way to eat. And I will never say that until there are head-to-head clinical trials comparing what I say to something else to say that it's superior to that, because you can't know until you do an experimental study head-to-head to say that something's better than another. So let's see what Dr. Kambata has to say. The video itself is called "Is It Okay to Eat Eggs Every Day?" from Mastering Diabetes.
In 2009, researchers published a prospective study using data from the Physician's Health Study 1, which studied more than 20,000 male participants, and from the Women's Health Study had a total of 36,000 and change female participants. This study reported something very interesting here, which is that men who reported eating 7 or more eggs per week had a 58% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And women who reported eating 7 or more eggs per week had a 77% increased risk of developing diabetes. So let's get a table on the screen here, because
who's being studied, right? So another category of, does this video apply to me? Is this video really having to do with anyone following a keto diet? And this study is not, because it's taking epidemiology study, or even if it's a cohort study, cohort epidemiology study, there can't be a whole lot of people in this study who are doing a keto diet, because it's been a while ago, and keto really has only become popular rather recently. So does this study apply to me? And then let's see what the information. I've heard this percentage, 77% more likely be overused, especially in the medication marketing. That there will be a twofold increase, but it went from 1 to 2. or there's a 30% reduction, but that meant it went from a very low number to even a lower number. So it's not like going from 30 whole percentage points, like from 60 to 30. It's going from something like 1 to 0.6. So that sort of is called an absolute risk reduction percentage wise, and then a relative risk reduction. So I have to think that he's talking about a 77% relative risk reduction, not an absolute risk reduction, but let's find out.
Here, because I want to show you how to read through this type of scientific information because it's really important. This increased risk was also calculated after adjusting for potential confounding variables such as age and BMI and whether they smoked and drank alcohol and exercise and had a history of high cholesterol and high blood pressure. So once you take away all those variables, you can isolate whether or not eggs had any influence on type 2 diabetes risk or not. So you can see here, on the left-hand side, it says egg intake per week. It starts at 0, then less than 1, then 1, 2 to 4, 5 to 6, and 7 or greater. And then there's 2 columns that have highlighted yellow values. The first column in the middle of the screen is for men. The column on the right is for women. And you can see that as the number of eggs per week increases as you go down from 0 all the way upwards of 7 or more, the risk for the development of type 2 diabetes increases significantly. And you can see that it goes from 9% to 18% to 46%, all the way upwards of 58%.
This is the relative risk, not the absolute risk. So, 58% absolute risk would be taking you from 58% to 0. And here, this is for those who are statistically minded, this is relative risk reduction, and we don't really worry about anything. We, the clinical epidemiologists, the physicians who have become statisticians, and that's the world that I've come from. McMaster is a place that I went to back in 1989, before it was called evidence-based medicine. So relative risk reduction at this rate, we kind of just dismiss out of hand. If the relative risk reduction isn't over 2, we kind of just say, there's so much noise in there. And Dr. Cyrus, who had such confidence, the confidence of a young PhD to say that the variable controlling you can control and exactly isolate. Actually, you can't. So that we say we can statistically adjust for things, and yet you can't really fully adjust. So better to have a prospective clinical trial. So I would love to see the study that takes people eating carbs and not eating carbs and give the people eating carbs eggs and the people not eating carbs eggs and see what happens in an experimental trial. And that would really get at the idea of if it's just the eggs doing it. And this is relative risk reduction, not absolute risk reduction. So while it sounds like it's, 77%, it's really not much at all.
Now, similarly for women, you can see that women who ate less than 1 egg per week had a 6% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And then as they ate more, it went from 6 to actually 3% negative, which is confusing. But then it went up to 19% increased risk, 18% increased risk. And then by the time they got to 7 eggs or more per week, they were now at a 77% increased risk. And again, this is measured when excluding a whole bunch of confounding variables, which could also contribute. And again, those confounding variables are things like age, BMI, smoking, alcohol consumption, exercise, a history of high cholesterol, and a history of high blood pressure. So this is very powerful data here because it demonstrates that in both men and in women, there's an increased risk. Women seem to have a 77% increased risk of type 2 diabetes with increasing egg consumption, and men had a 58% risk, but both of them trended in the same direction and followed the exact same trend as the previous research that we saw before.
I totally disagree. We're talking about type 2 diabetes, which again, now a clinical doctor like me knows that if you eat carbs, which is sugar, and starches get digested as sugar, you actually raise the blood sugar, or glucose more specifically. If you don't eat carbs, your blood sugar doesn't go up. You can check your own continuous glucose monitor or check and doctor, if you have type 1 diabetes, I'm sure you've looked at this. Just eating eggs is not going to raise the blood sugar much at all. So first you want to look, does this make sense that eggs would raise the blood sugar, in type 2 diabetes? And no, in fact, the diet used for diabetes 100 years ago had eggs in it because eggs have no carbs. So it was meat, poultry, fish, and shellfish, and eggs as the main source of nutrition. A strict diet meant foods without sugar as a treatment for a condition that had high blood sugar, which is called diabetes. Well, even 100 years ago, it was high urine sugar because they didn't have the means to check the blood sugar. So the idea that eggs cause diabetes at the face of it just doesn't make sense to me, because you're eating something that doesn't raise the blood sugar. Carbs, sugar, and then starches that lead to sugar as they're digested are the factors that raise the blood sugar. I do remember that. So the old paradigm is focusing on the increased fat in the pancreas as the cause and the only cause of diabetes. It can't be the carbs in the food. It can't be the food you ate that raises your blood sugar after the meal. It's that fat in that pancreas that's causing the insulin not to be able to come out, and insulin resistance. And while that might be a part of it, the food you eat is also a part of it. But this idea of fat in the pancreas, cut the fat out of the foods, and we know saturated fat is bad for you, has all kind of made this house of cards, if you will. And the study that I point people to, I hope I can put it in the link below, Arnie Astrup et al. Has a dozen leading nutritional experts from all around the world saying saturated fat is not a problem for human health. So anyway, I think this is kind of the old paradigm, kind of trying to make sense out of why people are getting better in a view. And, there are a lot of ways to be healthy. I don't want to call out other approaches to be bad unless there's data to say so, and human data, and hopefully prospective clinical trials. So really not good evidence. So it makes no sense to me that eggs causes diabetes. Never has. 100 years ago, they were giving people eggs when the urine sugar was high, and it reversed things. There were a couple papers looking at giving low carb diets, which includes eggs. So I couldn't find a paper that just looked at eggs raising the blood glucose, because I think it's obvious that it's not going to. So, but if you give a meal that contains eggs and you look at the blood glucose, it doesn't go up, because it's the carbs that raise the blood glucose in the short run. And then, I have to think the lack of clinical experience has now led to a generation of PhDs or super smart to think that the theory is going to overcome a lot of the clinical reality that we see, and maybe not even read about other types of approaches. But that would be, like not using a cell phone because you don't understand how the cell phone works. I've kind of given up on that understanding of technology. And as Jeff Volek at Ohio State says, nutritional ketosis is the new technology. Of course, it's not new. It's going into a safe mode because the energy is low. Every human goes into ketosis after 2 days of not eating anything, or after 2 days of not eating carbs. So in fact, there may be other benefits for ketosis. So I liked the fact that there was a paper, but I found just a brief literature review papers to kind of trump or over counter the paper, and then some meta-analyses which incorporate all of the papers together really don't have a strong signal even at a 1.1 or a 1.7 level, which is under 2 for a relative risk, which we kind of say, this is really not really anything meaningful. The meta-analyses, it all kind of waters out. I finally saw a paper, well, why don't we see what happens on a low-carb diet? And this was a paper out of Australia some years ago. I remember Manny Noakes doing some studies there. They, in the context of a low-carb diet, eating eggs actually had beneficial effects. So I think what you're going to see is you become a good consumer of the literature and of evidence you see, you can smell a rat here and there, and meaning if it's just animal, not human data, then, flat out ignore it. That's my view. Wait till it's done in humans. You have to understand the newsworthiness of something isn't always to be helpful for your health. The newsworthiness of something may become a mechanism to attract investors, or to be some other agenda on it. So be careful, especially most news media people don't understand that difference, and they'll automatically say, well, all right, then you want to be careful of this, when it really wasn't high level science. So careful the lack of medical training and then medical experience is a potential pitfall when you're learning from internet influencers, even if they come from the top universities. And I have to say the nutritional epidemiology training is kind of at odds with what we medical nutrition experts want and need. So we want evidence that would be as on par or better than what would be required for a drug to be approved for use in humans. And often the PhD investigators don't have that criteria or bar because there isn't one. So that there's no requirement for a study to or to have assembled enough studies to have the FDA level of approval for a diet or a food as there is for a drug. Maybe there should be, or maybe there shouldn't be. I think there are a lot of ways to be healthy. I wasn't presented with any data here from Mastering Diabetes. In fact, I'm almost to the point of getting my stamp to say, just don't listen to these guys. They're too biased. But I'm holding out judgment. We'll review another one and see. Back to what you can do. May 9 through 15, we're having a 7-day keto challenge. This will be the second time we've done it. I had people from the first challenge actually end up in my office. They are doing so well and needed help getting off medications. But this is to help people who cannot make the trip to a practitioner. It's an internet-based teaching in a 7-day challenge where we will teach you how to do keto right in a simple way that I've used in thousands of patients at Duke University in North Carolina. What you get in the challenge is the actual list of foods, which is a $10 value. It's just $9 to start. And then you also get daily support lives from myself and our nutritionist Amy Berger at Adapt Your Life Academy. And then you also get put into a private social support group. We use Facebook as the mechanism, so that for 7 days you'll be able to get started, and you have questions, or get over a hurdle, you have a side effect or a symptom, we'll help you get started. And then you can decide whether to continue it on. But we had such a great response the first time. We're doing it again. 7-day keto challenge, May 9 through 15. Join us if you can. I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and I'll see you on the next video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit